presentation on Fall River in the Civil War with Mr. James Perreira. Let's give him a hand. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me. Just a little background on myself. I'm a school teacher at Diamond Regional. I'm a special needs teacher there. I've been involved in the Civil War. Been interested in it since I was a kid. I've been reenacting the Civil War now for 10 years. I'm with the 28th Massachusetts Irish Brigade. The Reverend said I just got back. I participated in the 140th anniversary of Gettysburg. We spent 5 days on the field running around like nuts in wool in August. It was lots of fun. Anyway, to begin, first of all, I have some artifacts if you'd like to see. Come on up after the presentation, take a look, answer any questions. I also got some items on if you want to search out a relative or such. I have that with me also. First of all, the news of the Fort firing on Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861 was quickly followed by an ensuing call for a public meeting of citizens here in Fall River, which was held in City Hall on April 19. The largest enthusiastic attendance, Honorable N.B. Borden, who read the call, was elected chairman and made the opening address, followed by Daniel Anthony James Buffington, Doctors Foster Hooper and Robert T. Davis, John Westall, Walter C. Durfee, and others. Resolutions offered by Dr. Hooper were adopted declaring the government of the Union shall be sustained, and requesting the City Council to appropriate $10,000 for the aid of volunteers and their families. 5 days later, the Council made the appropriation requested, providing that $15 for an outfit should be paid to each volunteer, and a $15 a month, not more than 3 months for support of his dependents. Enlistments in the meantime were going on here in Fall River. An application was made to Governor Andrew, the third in the Commonwealth, for permission to form military companies. Massachusetts was the first state in the Union to offer troops and money for the preservation of the Union. The first two companies were A and B of the 7th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, which was mustered in on June 11th. A third company was formed, but it was decided not to muster in at that time, so it was disbanded. The 7th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry was also known as the Bristol County Regiment. It was recruited and organized in Taunton by Colonel, then Major General, Darius Nash Couch. Its 8 companies were made up of different cities and towns in Bristol County. Company A came out of Fall River, was commanded by David H. Dyer. Company B was out of Fall River also, was commanded by John Cushing. C came out of Rainham, D Taunton, E Dorchester, F Taunton, again G Easton, H out of Mansfield, I out of Auburn, K to fill out the regiment came out of Abington. The regiment remained encamped in Taunton. From what I can understand, it was Camp Joe Hooker, which is still there, which is in Lakeville, which was at that time was part of Taunton, preparing for active service in the field by Colonel Couch. On July 4th, 1861, the regiment paraded and marched to Taunton Green, where it took part in the celebration of the Declaration of Independence. On July 12th, the regiment was ordered to break camp and proceed to Washington. They boarded rail cars that took them to Mansfield, then to Providence, aboard the Providence Railroad. They steamed into Stonington, Connecticut, where they boarded the steamer Commonwealth. They arrived in New York City on the 13th at 5 a.m. By mid-afternoon, they had steamed down the harbor to take rail cars in Elizabethport, New Jersey, the Central Railroad. By 3 p.m., they were aboard rail cars bound for Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. When they arrived about 11 p.m., the next afternoon, they embarked for Baltimore. At about 5 miles from Baltimore, they filed out of the cars and loaded their muskets. Colonel Couch did not want to get caught napping like the 6th Mass had done earlier. The 6th Mass, as they got off the rail cars in Baltimore, which is now Camden Yards, they were attacked by the citizens of Baltimore, which was pro-South, and numerous soldiers were killed, so Colonel Couch was not taking that chance. They marched through Baltimore and arrived at the Baltimore-Washington Railroad Depot without an incident. Depot today is the site of Camden Yards, home of the Baltimore Orioles. The 7th arrived in Washington at 6:30 p.m. on July 15, 1861. The regiment then marched to Calorama Heights to set up camp. The regiment was much indebted to the Honorable James Buffington, the able representative, the 5th representative district in Congress. The able in Congress from Fall River, a refined and genial man for much of the regiment's comforts while encamped in Washington. Congressman Buffington enlisted as a private in Company A at the beginning of the conflict and served till the opening of the fall term of Congress, when he resumed his seat at the command of the constituents. And there was a great assistance to the soldiers from the districts in camps, hospitals, and in the field. The regiment was transferred to Camp Brightwood to assist in the defenses of Washington, D.C., and stayed there until March 11th in 1862. By the end of March, the regiment was assigned to the 4th Corps and proceeded by steamer to the Virginia Peninsula and the 7 Days' battles. The regiment finally saw the elephant on May 5th in the Battle of Williamsburg. It was here that Fall River suffered its first casualties. A private, Andrew S. Lawton, was killed when an artillery shell fired from the Confederate Fort Magruder landed among the valiant 7. Private Lawton, a 20-year-old teacher, died May 6th of his wounds. Also mortally wounded in the same artillery attack was Corporal Nathaniel S. Jerry, a 26-year-old blacksmith. He was mortally wounded and died of his wounds on May 21st, 1862, making these 2 soldiers Fall River's first Civil War casualties. It was at this time that Fall River's Sergeant Walter S. Goss from Company A started writing his observations of battles and camp life. He submitted these reports to the Woonsocket Patriot. His observations, as well as documented in the regimental history of the 7th Mass. Here is what Sergeant Goss reported about the 7th's first battle experience and Fall River's first casualties. My Company A rests across the road immediately behind a field piece. I am near the left, on the side of the road, and standing on the butt of a log, apparently pulled out of the road or was placed to obstruct. I observe that a man is at a muzzle of a cannon in the act of loading, while another stands with a ram in position to ram home the cartridge. When there comes a shell tearing its way through the woods, it is so near the ground that it almost seems to roll. I see it coming in this big spheroid. How slowly it seems to move compared to my thoughts, which are working at electric speed. Just before it reached the piece, it exploded with a bang, scattering deadly missiles in our ranks. The man with the cartridge is killed. The one with the ram is picked up with both feet hanging limp, and I find myself dreamily wondering what has become of his shoes. When I am aroused by being jerked backwards off the log, an exciting voice exclaiming, "You son of a gun, come and help me, take Lawton to the rear." My reply, so as I was told, was to hell with Lawton. Where are the stretcher bearers? I looked about me and see 2 men of my company going to the rear. Both were mortally wounded. Lawton lived but a few moments and died regretting that he could not have been spared long enough to have gotten just 1 shot at the enemy before he died, while the other, the genial Nathaniel S. Jerry, lingered a week or more. It's interesting to note that Walter Goss didn't report back to his hometown paper. He reported to a Rhode Island paper, the Woonsocket Patriot. McClellan's Peninsula campaign again was painful for Fall Riverites and the 7th Mass. At Oak Grove near 7 Pines on June 25th, Fall River lost its first officer. At Oak Grove, a 29-year-old machinist, First Lieutenant Jesse D. Bullock, was killed instantly when a rebel artillery casing struck First Lieutenant Bullock on the left hip, cutting his sword in 2 and inflicting an awful and mortal wound. The summer of '62 was uneventful, as the 7th spent it retreating off the Virginia Peninsula and various encampments throughout northern Virginia. Back home in Fall River, the excitement was just beginning. President Lincoln had called for 300,000 more men in 1862. In Fall River, another public meeting was held on July 11th, at which the bounty of $100 for 3 years enlistment was recommended. At a meeting on August 14, 1862, it was resolved that the patriotism of Massachusetts will sustain the government in putting down the rebellion at any cost of men and money. It was voted to raise the money by subscription to add another $100 to each soldier's bounty. And to assist Reverend Eli Grant in raising a company. September 1st in 1862, the city government voted a bounty of $200 for each volunteer for 9-month service. Reverend Grant, who was pastor of the Brayton M.E. Church, had formerly been a student at West Point and had a little difficulty in getting the men to form Company C of the 3rd Mass, of which he was elected captain. Andrew R. Wright was captain of Company D, also raised here at this time. And to these officers, swords were presented at a meeting in City Hall in September of 9th. To Mr. Grant by Reverend Thomas Holmes, and to Mr. Wright by Reverend Charles A. Snow, afterward chaplain of the 3rd Regiment. The two companies were escorted to the train by many citizens, and as usual, there were tearful eyes and hasty farewells on the part of those left behind. But the men went away cheerfully and gladly. On the return, June 17, 1863, they were greeted by a big crowd, escorted by the city government and the fire department through decorated streets to the city hall, where a formal welcome was given, followed by a collation. By early September, word was that General Lee was moving to invade the North. Maryland was his focus, Antietam, or Sharpsburg, as the Rebs called it. It is considered America's bloodiest day, where approximately 24,000 Americans were killed in one day. The boys of the Bristol County Regiment were extremely fortunate. General Couch's 4th Corps were held in reserve for the September 18th battle. They were positioned on Maryland Heights, which is roughly 1¼ miles from the Antietam Creek, or 2½ miles from the center of Sharpsburg. The 7th lost not one soldier, but did suffer 9 wounded, mostly from errant rebel artillery. The Maryland Heights are right here. They were positioned right here. The battle took place right north of Sharpsburg, which is right here. They were held in reserve. By November 9, 1862, General Couch was promoted to command of the famous 2nd Corps. The 7th was also transferred from the 4th Corps to the 6th Corps, where we'll see some hard fighting under Major General F. Smith. The long march on the new commander of Potomac, Major General Ambrose Burnside, a Rhode Island native, took the homeboys to the vicinity of Fredericksburg in the winter of 1862, where they prepared for a grand assault on Marie's Heights. They crossed the Rappahannock River on the 11th, and amid the constant rebel artillery and sharpshooter fire. They acted in skirmishes for a couple of days, allowing the rest of the army to cross the Rappahannock. On the 15th, they formed a line of battle on the left of the major Union thrust and awaited orders to attack. They were over here. But Major William F. Franklin was hampered by delays and orders that were hard to understand. 40,000 troops never attacked the rebel fortifications, fortunately for the 7th, thus saving numerous casualties. The 7th was the last to recross the Rappahannock, as they were held as a covering army's retreat. Back on the home front, numerous citizens were instrumental in helping the Union cause. Several clergy were very prominent during this time: Reverend Eli Thurston, Reverend P.B. Hogwatt, Reverend Mr. Chapman, Dr. Adams, and Reverend Edwin Murphy, the latter of St. Mary's, preached loyalty to the Union and devotion to her cause, both in and out of the pulpit. The women formed the Sewing Society on April 27, 1861, which continued until July 1865, with Mrs. Richard Borden as president throughout, and which sent to the soldiers a large number of shirts, socks, blankets, and other articles, in addition to jellies, newspapers, and books. A children's lint society also kept up during the war. General Burnside was replaced as commander of the Army of the Potomac with Massachusetts' own Major General Joe Hooker. General Hooker decided to press the rebels at Chancellorsville. Hooker gave orders to General Sedgwick, commander of the 6th Corps, to proceed to Fredericksburg. Site of the previous winter's tragedy. On May 3rd, the order came to unsling knapsacks and prepared to lead an assault on Marie's Heights. With a stern order, forward 7, they moved toward the heights. After they crossed the canal, they ran through the city. They moved toward the charge with their muskets uncapped, the order being given to depend on the bayonet. Just as they got in motion, the rebel batteries upon the heights opened up with shell. The column moved by fours, with shell and canister cutting through the regiment, till they had gotten within 100 feet of the stone wall. When Boxdale's brigade of the Mississippians poured a terrific volley from the right and checked the 7th for about 5 minutes. The road and gulch was filled with the dead and wounded and dying. More than 50 men of the leading companies of the 7th, F, E, and K, were killed or wounded. But the brave men still lunged forward, men falling around them like leaves in autumn. Out of the confusion, a shout rang out, "Forward, boys, forward!" And led by the gallant officer of the 7th, struggled through and over the stone wall, bleeding at every step. If it is here that 2 soldiers received the Congressional Medal of Honor, Fall River's own James Holhouse and Dighton's James Luther, I will expound on each later in the program. Turning to the right, they rushed over the rebel redoubt, capturing 2 pieces of artillery. The flag of the 7th was first to wave over the rebel stronghold, having been planted by Company A's Color Sergeant Earl Bowen in Fall River. In the space of 20 minutes, the 7th Mass had lost over 100 men killed and wounded, capturing 2 artillery pieces and captured over 100 prisoners. In this glorious assault, the regiment had lost over 1/4 of its active force. But the regiment was not to stand still. It continued to press the Confederates towards Salem Heights. In this short and bloody battle, the 7th Massachusetts held in check more than 2 brigades of the rebels for over an hour. The list of killed and wounded include the following Fall Riverites. Killed was Sergeant James L. Brightman of Company A. Killed was Private James O'Neill, Company A. Killed was Private William Hazeltine, Company B. The regiment remained in camp till June 6th, when they started retreating toward the historic meeting of the 2 armies in a small town in Pennsylvania. By June 27th, they had crossed the Potomac as they continued to march into Maryland, marching 25 miles a day. Till the end of June, it was still a ways from the town of Gettysburg. On July 1st, they marched all night until 4 p.m. on July 2nd, making 37 miles. When they arrived on the battlefield of Gettysburg, they rested and filled their canteens from Rock Creek. General Sedgwick had called on the 2nd Brigade of the 6th Corps to help the 5th Corps thwart the rebel attacks upon Little Round Top. The 7th was part of this group. After marching nearly 40 miles, they enthusiastically took the battlefield. Though never really getting into the battle, they did help win the day. Confederate General James Longstreet wrote after the war, "Preparing for another attack upon the Union lines, I rode forward toward the point front of our position. But seeing the enemy rapidly forming new lines of battle with the fresh troops, Massachusetts troops I saw, I thought it prudent to desist from attack until our lines had been reformed, having suffered very severely the assaults delivered upon the Union lines." So in retrospect, the 2nd Brigade of the 6th Corps, of which the 7th was part, had not been in this position. It is safe to say that Longstreet would have continued his attack and probably had taken Little Round Top and maybe taken the battle of Gettysburg. On July 3rd, the Corps was used in reserve, moving behind the lines to act as reinforcements if needed be. They were subject to severe artillery fire during this time due to Confederate overshooting of Union lines. As time rolls on, the 6th Corps at Gettysburg will be remembered as helping the 5th Corps save Little Round Top with its timely arrival. July 4th saw the 7th take position on the front lines as they were the fresh troops to await another of General Lee's attack, but it never came. Lee had decided to retreat to Virginia. By the 5th of July, 6th Corps was in active pursuit of the Confederate Army until the end of the month of July. Back in Fall River, the war took a different turn. President Lincoln had instituted a draft for more troops. Excuse me. draft was several times delayed, but finally took place in New Bedford on July 22nd, 1863, when 1,404 names of Fall River citizens were placed in a box and 405 drawn, of which John Sullivan was the first. The men drawn included both members of one prominent firm in the city, Shaw and Hogue, painters on 2nd Street, 3 members of the Baptist Temple Choir, 2 stewards and 2 class leaders of the First Methodist Church, and 1 lawyer, Simeon Borden. Holder B. Durfee, a son of Dr. Nathan Durfee, then a student in Yale, and William H. Borden, son of Colonel Richard Borden, was also drawn. And 22 of the 26 men enrolled from Steep Brook. The names of the city were drawn first by request and were brought here by John C. Milne and Reverend Charles A. Snow in a carriage and rushed into print as promptly as possible to relieve the anxiety of the crowd that surrounded the newspaper office. Substitutes were furnished in many cases, securing and varying prices. Back then, if you were drafted into the Army, when Lincoln Corps was drafted, you could get a substitute. You would have to pay him to be your substitute. Varying prices, $800 in one instance. I don't think it was the 2 painters. There would be 4 more drafts during the remaining years of the war. All would be in the summer of 1864, where roughly 150 more Fall River citizens would be called to save the Union. The 7th Mass in the campaign of 1863 and up to the morning of May 3rd, 1864 had marched in direct marches 705 miles, besides untold miles while on picket duty. But the last year of the war would see its hardest fighting. The 7th Mass was part of General George W. Getty's division and saw action in the Battle of the Wilderness. At 9 a.m. on May 5th, the 7th Mass was in position to support the 10th Mass around Wilderness Tavern. The division was soon detached to Hancock's 2nd Corps to protect the right flank. By 5 p.m., the Getty's division included the 7th supporting the center. The 2nd Corps would have fought against General Henry Heath's division of General A.P. Hill's Corps along the Orange Plank Road. On May 6th, they were held in reserve. During the May fighting, in the thick woods around the tavern, the 7th lost 85 men, killed or wounded. They lost another 35 in the May 6th fighting. The list of killed and wounded, including the following Fall River gentlemen: killed Private William Warhurst, Company B, and killed Sergeant Edward P. West of Company B. On May 8th, the fighting took the 7th to Spotsylvania Courthouse, where they formed a line of battle with the 5th Corps, and at dark, charged on the enemy, who was in strong position on elevated ground. Their line was broken in the 7th Mass, captured the color standing, color guarding 32 men of the Georgia Regiment, but losing 2 men killed and 4 wounded. During this time back home, the return of Company G of the 58th Mass under Captain Brady on furlough on April 5th, 1864, was celebrated by a parade. On June 20th, 58 men of Company A and B of the 7th returned home with much of the same fanfare. So by 64, the enlistments are starting to run out and boys are starting to come back home. The last major battle of 740 was Cold Harbor. From June 2nd through the 12th, the 7th was on constant duty by night and day, constantly exposed to enemy fire, and losing men daily, having greatly reduced in numbers by the serious casualties of the campaign thus far. The duties of the regiment were usually arduous. The necessities of position required almost constant duty in the front line. The regiment lost at Cold Harbor and on the march from Spotsylvania Courthouse 39 killed and wounded and taken prisoners. On the night of the 12th, the regiment moved out of the lines of Cold Harbor and marched towards the James River. On the 13th, they marched 25 miles, crossing the Chickahominy, and encamped for the night. On June 15th, 64, they bivouacked on the banks of the James. The term of service of the 7th Mass having expired this day. It was relieved from duty and ordered back to Massachusetts to be mustered out of service. The regiment slept peacefully on the banks of the James, the first time in 30 days, for they had marched and fought constantly during that time. and in no part of the lines or army had been exempt from being under fire for that number of days. On the morning of the 16th, he embarked on the steamer Keyport and left Wilson's Landing, Virginia, for Washington, D.C. Arrived in Washington about 11 on the 17th, and at 6 p.m. took a special train to New York City. At Philadelphia, they met with a flattering reception and a hospital entertainment by the citizens and soldiers of the Soldiers' Home. At New York, they were comfortably quartered at the Parks Barracks. And on the evening of the 19th, they took a special train on the New Haven Railroad for Taunton, Mass. They arrived in Taunton about 5 a.m. on the 20th, unexpectedly. But as soon as the citizens knew of their arrival, they returned out in mass, and after a most cordial reception by the mayor, who had wished them Godspeed 3 long years ago, provided the regiment a most bountiful collation around the green. After were furloughed until July 4th, when they paraded and assisted the citizens of Taunton in the celebration of the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The regiment was mustered out on June 27th in 1864, but the war was not over and would not be over for another 10 months. Keeping up with the valiant courage of these men, 15 men of companies A and B of the 7th Mass re-enlisted into the 37th Mass until the end of the war. Of the 15, only one, Christopher Hardin, would get killed, making him the last Fall River casualty in the War of the Rebellion. Back in Fall River, the news of the fall of Richmond was greeted by ringing of bells, and on Lee's surrender, there was more bell ringing, including that of the Central Church by 2 young women. The firing of a cannon, the parade of the light infantry, which had returned from a brief period of duty, the dismissing of the schools, and the general suspension of work. In the evening, a meeting was held in City Hall, presided over by the mayor, at which addresses were made, and America, John Brown Body, and Old Hundred was sung. The assassination of Lincoln became known generally through the tolling of the City Hall bell. It was learned with unspeakable sorrow and indignation. While the crowd was gathered about the bulletin, a notorious Copperhead, a success sympathizer, was heard to say that it was best news he had heard in many years. He was at once set upon by bystanders and kicked and punched till a flag was procured, unfurled, and he saluted him. The mayor and the city marshal then came up and assisted him to his store at number 5 Bedford Street, where he locked himself in. But the crowd continued to gather and show signs of hostility. He was glad to escape by the rear window and take refuge in the strongest cell in the lockup. The crowd broke the windows in his store and demolished things generally, after which they requested several persons who had not displayed the colors to do so. Their request was promptly complied with. Obviously, Florida was pro-union. The war furnished a total of Fall River men, 1,770 men for the United States forces during the war, comprising of 497 for the Navy, 17 regulars, 823-year men, 207 9-months men, 192 3-months men, and 37 1-year men. These included companies A and B of the 7th Regiment, Company G of the 26th, a large portions of Company F and G of the 58th, in addition to many other regiments that enlisted for 3 years. It also sent out Companies C and D of the 3rd Regiment for 9 months, and numbers of other regiments, while local men entered the regular army and regiments from other states. The city government appropriated, on account of the war, a total of $107,000, $107,828,000 for the aid to soldiers' families, which was repaid by the state of $127,510. Now, what I'll do is go over certain individuals that took part in the 7th Mass that I have information on. The first one is Darius Nash Couch. He's the first colonel of the 7th Mass. He was from Taunton. He married the mayor's daughter, Crocker. At the end of the war, he was so revered by the state when all the regiments came back. He was at the State House. He was the one that accepted all the battle flags from all the regiments at the State House. He lived his life in Taunton. He died in Taunton and is buried now in Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Taunton. James Buffington. Was born in Fall River, March 16, 1817. Was the first mayor of the city of Fall River. At the outbreak of the war, he was representing the 2nd Representative District of Massachusetts in Congress, where he served 7 terms. He enlisted as a private Company A, 7th Mass Volunteers, and served with that company until August 24th of 61, when the Secretary of War requested that he fill a seat in Congress, discharged him so he would be able to do much more for all the soldiers. His patriotic endeavors during the war will always be remembered. Comrade Buffington died in his home in Fall River, March 6, 1874. Beloved by all, with a record of brave and honest legislator, entitling him to as much praise for his services. Edward T. Marvel was born in Rhode Island, served his company until detailed at General Couch's headquarters as a clerk, where he faithfully performed his duties until November 21st of 1862, when he was discharged for disability. He represented Fall River in the Massachusetts legislature, was the early commander of proposed 46 GAR, and from 1870 served as Deputy Collector of Customs at Fall River till his death. Chester W. Green was born in Providence on October 7, 1811, went south when he was 21 years of age, and was there for 11 years. He married Miss Abby S. Stedman of Ohio at Natchez, Mississippi, where he was engaged in business as an auctioneer. He moved to Fall River in 1844, first engaged in the grocery business, afterwards as an auctioneer and a real estate agent. Was deputy sheriff, also selectman, and assessor under town government. Was chief engineer of the fire department and city marshal. The latter he resigned to enter the U.S. service. Was the first captain of Company A of the 7th Mass. Was promoted and commissioned lieutenant colonel of the 7th. When Couch was promoted to brigadier general, Lieutenant Colonel Green was in command of the regiment. On November 22nd, he resigned and returned to his home in Fall River, where he engaged in business as an auctioneer and a real estate broker. Nathaniel S. Jerry was born in Providence, February 14, 1835. He was a blacksmith before the war. He was wounded at the Battle of Williamsburg, Virginia on May 5th in 62. His leg amputated. He died May 17 in 1862. He was one of 3 brothers who were in Company A and was the first soldier from Fall River to give his life for his country. David H. Dyer was born in Lee, Maine on September 16, 1933. He moved to Fall River in 1844 at the time when he commenced work on an operative in a cotton mill. At the age of 16, he joined the Fall River Artillery Company under Captain John Sanford. He was promoted sergeant and served 4 years in his company. At the outbreak of the war, Mr. Dyer was a bookkeeper for the American Linen Company, which he left to enter the Army. When the news of the firing of Fort Sumter came, he immediately reported to the drugstore of William H. Nye, where he met a few men and all signed an agreement to offer their services to Governor Andrew. This squad became the nucleus of the 7th Massachusetts Regiment Volunteers. Governor Andrew commissioned Mr. Dyer captain, and Captain Dyer went to Washington with his command and resigned in November of 1861. In 1868, he organized and constructed the mechanics mills, he was treasurer until 1871, when he organized Wiedemoe Mills and was its treasurer. In 1872, he constructed the Sagamore Mills, was its treasurer and business manager, served as treasurer and manager of the Quakersham Mills, was an active member of the JR, served as its quartermaster of the Richard Boarding Post 46. Henry B. Bennett was born in Fall River on January 1st, 1837, was a clerk before the war. After the war, he became a clerk in the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. He was very active in the JR in the District of Columbia. Henry E. Kay was born in Fall River May 21st, 1836. He was a machinist before the war, was wounded in the leg at Salem Heights on May 3rd, 1863, and again in the same leg a year later at the Battle of Wilderness. One bullet above the knee, the other below. After the war, he continued to be a machinist, owning his own company in Fall River. manufacturing thread and roll covering machinery. B. Frank Jerry, born in Central Falls, Rhode Island. Before the war, he was a machinist. He moved to Perreira after the war, where he continued to be a machinist. Albert S. Palmer was born in Fall River, was a blacksmith before the war, was promoted to corporal and sergeant for bravery, was wounded in the nose and ear at the charge of up Louise Heights in the Battle of Fredericksburg. In the Battle of Wilderness, he was again wounded in the left leg. On return to Fall River, he resumed being a blacksmith until 1870. He opened a grocery store for 17 years. He then became the truant officer for the city of Fall River. He was past commander of the camp of Post 46 GAR. James Holhouse, born in Stockport, England on Christmas, 1839. Came to the U.S. in 1856. Before the war, he was a weaver in the No. 1 Union Mill in Fall River. At Fredericksburg, he was taken to living prison in Richmond, but was paroled a few weeks later. Wounded at the Battle of Wilderness. After the war, he was a loom fixer. He became sick from diseases contracted during his military service. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at Louise Heights on May 3, 1863. It reads, with one companion voluntarily and conspicuous daring, advanced beyond his regiment, which had broken in the assault, and halted beneath the crest. Following the example of these two men, the colors were brought to the summit, and the regiment was advanced to the position held. James Holhouse is buried in Oak Grove Cemetery by the, I don't know what you call it, it's where they used to put the bodies in the winter. Couldn't dig it around. It's like a big hill with a big door. You see a big white granite, a big white quartz stone that's right near there. This is his grave. Obviously, his headstone does not read Congressional Medal of Honor. The government, in turn, will put this down, so it will be on record for all to say. Florida also had another Congressional Medal of Honor winner, another battle, Philip K. Blunt. He was a private in Company A of the 2nd Mass Cavalry. On September 24, 1864, at Perreira, Virginia, he received the Congressional Medal of Honor for capture of a battle flag. To this day, I'm trying to find where Mr. Baker was buried. After the war, a little side bit, Florida was very instrumental, obviously was very patriotic throughout the war. One of the big things, Massachusetts doesn't have many Civil War locations you can go visit. One of the only ones is probably Fort Warren in Boston Harbor. It was used as a Confederate prison for very high-ranking Confederates. Matter of fact, the most famous one was the Vice President of the Confederacy. I believe his name was Stevens. When he was captured, he was shipped by steamer from Fort Monroe up to New York City. And from New York City, they took the Fall River line to Battleship Cove. He disembarked at Battleship Cove, where he's put on the Old Colony Railroad and brought up to Boston to be held in Confederate prison. So Fall River did have a part in bringing Confederate prisoners to Boston. At the end of the war, the GAR, the Grand Army Republic, was formed. It was formed by John Logan, a popular general from Illinois. The Grand Army Republic is basically a veterans organization like the VFW, the AMVETS, and such. The camp was called Post 46. They were all numbered. Bedford was the honored camp of Post 1. Camp 46 is Fall River's Post. It was named after Richard Borden. To this day, it is still there. We all know it as the old firehouse smoke shop. It is still there. If you look above the door, there's a little black sign. If you can read it, but the sign is still there. It says Post 46 GAR. I do know the gentleman who owns the place, and there is nothing left of anything that would be Civil War related. Usually had upstairs was the grand hall, sort of like basins, and downstairs was a meeting place. But upstairs would have a lot of the artifacts that would have drums and muskets and all that good stuff that was great. But the GAR, which is nice, still exists in Fall River, unlike other towns. I know Somerset's was there, it was taken over by the Women's Auxiliary, and now it's a residential home. Taunton was taken over by somebody else, and Bedford's is still there. But they are becoming more and more rare. And it's nice to see that Fall River still has its GAR hall. And the young man that owns this, John Grant, decides to keep the sign still above so people doing research and all know where it is. Richard Borden decided to build a monument in Oak Grove Cemetery to honor those Fall River soldiers who had passed away. As soon as you enter Oak Grove Cemetery, you can see the GAR lot, as it's called. Richard Borden built that, or I should say paid for that monument. The cannons that are around it are original Civil War cannons. Anytime you go to a town or city that has cannons in the front of their town hall or the monument, those cannons not bad, huh? I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Those cannons are original Civil War cannons. After the war, they had all these cannons laying around. They didn't know what to do with them. They had melted down so much bronze and brass to make the cannons. They didn't know what to do with them. So anybody who wanted them could have them. So town governments decided, hey, look, make a monument on them. So they were all given out to whoever wanted them. And Fall River took 4, I believe, and put around their Civil War monument in the GAR lot of Oak Grove Cemetery. They all have numbers on them. I have somewhere, I don't think with me, tells you exactly where those cannons came from, what ship or what defenses around Washington, or exactly when they were made, who made them, the foundry, all that. They've all been documented. They've all come with a long history. So they're nice to see when you get up there. Just be careful because there are a lot of bees nests in the mustard. As you can see, the front is very well engraved. For those who can't see, it's to the memory of those who fought and died for the maintenance of the Union, affected by Richard Borden. And he proceeded to list every single soldier that had perished in the war to save the Union. Before I finish, a couple other things. There was a Civil War statue years and years ago, that probably some of you remember. Florida had its own statue of an infantryman, I can't say it now, a soldier, and it was located on the northeast corner of Kennedy Park. Well, I guess in the 50s and 60s, the local youth decided to disgrace it or marked it up as such. So the city decided it was going to take it down to refurbish it. It was put in the garage, and all the research that I can find is that it's gone. A gentleman that I know was also doing the research on the monument. He's checked every single city garage, it's gone. So what all that stands at Fall River's statue for Civil War veterans is just the base. That's all that's there. If you look at the base, it says a little, but it had sort of like the Statue of Liberty on the other end of the park. It was sort of like that. You can still find postcards from Fall River, where it shows Kennedy Park. It wasn't called South, it was called South Park back then, I think. And it shows the statue of what exactly it looked like. We've looked into figuring out how much it would cost to replace it. It'd be somewhere in the $50,000 range. So obviously, if I pass the hat tonight, you're going to cut it. There were others local boys who received Medal of Honor winners. There was a guy from Freetown, John Dean, who also became commander of the GAR. He was in the 29th Mass. He was an officer observing an abandoned gun within Fort Haskell, called for volunteers, and under heavy fire worked the gun until the enemy's advancing line was routed. He's buried in the Taunton Cemetery. There's also William Downey from the 4th Mass Cavalry, and he volunteered as a member of a boat crew which went to the rescue of a large number of Union soldiers on board the stranded steamer Buster, and with great gallantry assisted in conveying them to shore, being exposed to the entire time heavy fire from the Confederate battery. So, needless to say, Fall River has an outstanding history of the Civil War. Not only the soldiers that died and bled for the Union, but the citizens who basically supported everything they did. The women, whether it was making clothes, children with the Lynch societies. It just proves what this area felt for the Union at the time and how it still feels today as you celebrate America every year. There's an amazing amount of patriotism in Fall River. At this time, does anybody have any questions? Turn the lights on if you like. My uniform, okay. Oh, this is my daughter. This is my little daughter with me. Her name's Connie. She's dressed as a little 18-year-old girl. My uniform is a lieutenant's uniform. The uniforms back then were made out of wool. We fought in wool. There were no summer uniforms. Infantry was a little different. They had light blue pants with blue sack coat like this. I'm just an officer. There are two types of hat. One is a kepi, which is like this. The other one is an enlisted man's forage cap. That's this one here. It's called a forage cap because it would open up and form a pocket so you could get food or eggs or whatever you could steal. The gun that was issued to the 7th Mass was an Enfield. This is an Enfield. 57 cal, which is basically almost 5/8 thick. It's a rifled musket, it's a muzzle loader, which means it has to be loaded from the muzzle. You shoot this accurately 3 times in 1 minute. Other than that, you're tired. The bullets are conical shape, these are extremely accurate, unlike Revolutionary War guns. This is the bullet that came out of this gun. To be eligible for service, you have to have 2 front teeth. They have to be adjacent. The reason why is you have to take your cartridge out, which the bullet was in, and bite it. You didn't have time to pull it apart. You had to bite it. So you needed 2 front teeth. A lot of boys would take their teeth and punch them out. So they would not be eligible, especially during the draft. Well, the problem is, once they did that, they put you in cavalry. Well, the artillery, well, you didn't need teeth. They didn't tell them that until after you punch your teeth out. Once you bite the cartridge, you put it in, the bullet would be sitting right on top. You would have to remove your ramrod and drive the bullet all the way down to the bottom. Pick the ramrod up and replace it. That was the most important thing, because if you didn't replace your ramrod and you lost it, you couldn't fire anymore. Now the charge was set, then you'd have to open up your hand and put a percussion cap on there. Once you put the percussion cap, you're ready to shoot. 3 shots in 1 minute. Why this gun was so accurate is because the gun is rifled. The barrel is rifled. And being conical shaped like a football and hollow in the back, when the bullet comes out, it spins like a football, becoming extremely accurate. Problem was, the generals at the time were Mexican War generals who had fought with smoothbores. Smoothbores is basically a rifle that's just a pipe. And they put a round ball in it. And the round ball comes out after it's being fired, and it's like a knuckleball if you're thinking about baseball. It has no accuracy. It moves wherever it wants to go. It was only accurate to 30 yards, those guns. So they relied on the bayonet. The The bayonet was designed perfectly as concave, three-cornered, so when it did stab you, it didn't slice you. It left a hole that wouldn't heal. You would die of disease, infection. But these bullets were accurate, these guns were accurate, I'm sorry, to 600 yards. So it went from 30 yards to 600 yards. So when they all lined up shoulder to shoulder and marched in, by the time they got to 100 yards to use the bayonet, they were already decimated. So the gun is what really decided the war. The uniform, go back to that, is just all wool. You were issued one pair of pants and one jacket for the entire war. Shirts, you were issued 2 shirts unless your wife made you some. It was said you could take a bath once or twice a year. And that would be in a river. Obviously, everybody else is in the same river, so the horses at the cavalry just came in. We also drank the same water you bathed. The jackets, the jackets.
Rifles in the Civil War, muscle loading?
No, they started coming out with breech loaders, like the Sharps carbine, were breech loaders, but they were shorter. They were used for cavalry because they were a lot easier. Yes?
There were some infantry regiments that were furnished with rifle-length versions of the Sharps and the Spencer. There weren't very many.
No, they weren't too big. They didn't believe in them. For some reason, they didn't like them. The infantry were very regimented. They liked their old stuff.
A lot of that had to do with the head of ordnance in Washington named Ripley, but he was replaced early in the Civil War by someone who was more sympathetic to modern technology. And after that point, in 1862, I think it was, several regiments that when they were fortunate for
They toward the end of the war, the new stuff started coming out. The Confederates were amazing because they were on the cutting edge of stuff. They had to do. They lacked the men. So what they did is the Confederates had landmines, they had grenades, submarine, and early in the war when they had landmines, Union soldiers were getting killed. And the Union complained to the Confederacy that you can't kill a man without looking at him. So the Confederacy said, yeah, okay, we won't use them anymore. And they never did. So there was a lot of, gentleman thing and honor stuff involved in this. Those stories that we hear of after when it got dark, there was no more fighting. They would trade water, tobacco, coffee, stuff like that. They'd put up in the middle of a battle, flag of truce, and go out and get their wounded and come back and start over again. Prisoners of war were exchanged at night. If you were a captured prisoner, especially in the early part of the war, I'd bring you back to camp. You'd sit at camp that night, and when the battle was all done, okay, you can go back. See you later. And you go back to your lines. But General Grant decided that, hey, the South's biggest negative we have is lack of men, so we're going to start keeping our prisoners. And then that's when you see stuff like Fort Douglas in Chicago and places like that that just were horrendous places to be. Yes?
I was aware of Captain Hunter and John Dorn, 2 Bell Harbors. I never heard of these two. Are they out anywhere in the City Hall or the Battleship?
Battleship? Why would we be on the battleship?
There's some kind of a tablet on there with honoring the people who won the awards.
I don't know. The Civil War is pretty much forgotten in a lot of cities and towns.
Yeah, are you aware of any other men of ours besides Hunter?
I only know Hunter.
Doran and these two.
I know. I mean, I got a list of local guys. Tiverton, there's one in Tiverton, one in Freetown, places like that. That might be World War II or World War I guys, still Spanish American. Yes?
What was the name of the gentleman you said from Fall River who was in the 2nd Mass Cavalry?
Downey. William Downey, 4th Mass Cavalry.
Wasn't there someone from the 2nd you said also?
No. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Philip Baybutt.
How did he spell his last name?
B-A-Y-B-U-T-T.
William?
Philip.
One more question. Well, we got 2 hands up, because we gotta move
Can
along.
you tell me a website for Civil
None.
War? There's none?
None. I get all my stuff from reading. I get the regimental history of 7th Mass, I get the history of Fall River.
Is there books in Fall River Library?
I don't know if there is.